The
That's what your
second time
sister
around,
does.
you
Yeah.
know what happened, so it does help because I think one of the harder parts of the emergency C-section outside of the emergency and the NICU baby issues was the fact that I had no idea what came next. So I had my C-section, so they stitched me up, so I go to recovery. Well, what happens in recovery? I don't know. My baby's in NICU. No one's telling me anything. What's happening? I don't know. Then they send me to my room. By that point, we had some word on my son and he was doing okay. And it's like, oh, what do we do now? I don't know. So you've got a catheter. How long does it stay in? I don't know. What kind of pain meds are you on? Very important pain meds. Let us not forget to discuss them. I had Dilaudid, which will kill any pain, but will make you loopy. So if I had to give advice, I'd say try to find something that isn't Dilaudid to control your pain. Because people have gotten by on what, like Advil or no, ibuprofen or stuff. So, you know, opioids do the job, mess you up a bit. Don't particularly appreciate that part. Then you're like, okay, catheter's out. Now, how do I get out of bed? How do I use the bathroom? How do I get to the bathroom? There's just all this stuff that you've never done before in your life, and it's just a process. And then the second time, you're like, okay, I know what's happening. I'm going to go to the recovery. I'm going to hang out there for a bit. My son, well, at this point, my husband had the baby with me. So we got to hang out in recovery. Then we go to the room. We get to hang out in the room. Pediatrician comes in and visits. That's great. I already know how to get out of bed with a nurse standing there to make sure I don't fall on my face. All of that stuff is, by that point, you're like, oh, I have a plan. And
Yes.
the hardest part of an emergency C-section is I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. One thing I just thought of that my sister mentioned that I do think is like a thing to consider for a repeat C-section, because I would agree that in most parts it's all better. But one thing she did say, and I could see this. So a lot of people we hear, so I don't know, even if you're planning for like a VBAC or whatever, a lot of times you'll hear people like in the groups we're in, they'll say like that they're purely avoiding epidurals for the fact that they don't like needles. And there's a big population of people that don't like needles. Now I was always one that was like, I would prefer to not have a needle in my spine, but then I felt labor and was like, you can stab it in my eye for all I care. Like, I don't care where you put the needle, you know, but there are people who are like really, and my sister's one of them. So she was saying with her more emergency section, she was so in active labor and so sick with her blood pressure being so high and having the magnesium drip and all that, that by the time that she got the needle in her, you know, that was kind of secondary, but she was saying, it was really nerve wracking in the repeat C-section, the planned one. She said that she was like, that was actually like the worst part for me. Cause she was like, you know, you are just, nothing's happening. So all you have is time to kind of think about it. So I would say if you're somebody who is really anxious about like the spinal or the epidural or the needle going in, you know, if you're nervous about that, or you're just someone who's anxious about needles, talk to like your OB going into it, talk to anesthesiology going into it, just because I think that they're very used to dealing with that. They're very aware of it and can probably, you know, they probably might have a different approach, or at least they're just aware of it going into it to kind of provide that support to you. Just because she actually said, she was like, Megan, that was actually just the worst part. I was so nervous about it. And then I was thinking about it. And so it was just worse for me. And then I swear I felt it more. So you know, she just, her nerves made it worse. So I think that's just something to be aware of, that when you're not in active labor, you might be a little more aware of that part.
I gotta agree that, well, actually I had my first epidural when I was in labor. So I'll tell you what, that labor pain sure takes your mind off of the whole needle in your back part. But
Sure
when
does.
you're not in labor, it's the same procedure, but you're like, you have two things going on. One, you are paying attention to what they're doing. So it helps to have someone, they usually, I think, have a nurse sit in front of you and hold your hand or hold your arm or whatever they do to help steady you and focus you so you're not thinking about what's happening behind you. And the second thing is that epidural, or actually spinal the second time around, is there for a reason, and that's so you don't feel anything when you're in surgery. So there's that little extra anxiety of, well, it worked last time. I think it'll work this time. I really hope it'll work this time. So when they do the sensation test on you in the OR, I'll tell you what, it's a relief when they say, "Did you feel that?" And you be like, "What?" I didn't feel anything. And you're like, "Oh, good. I didn't feel anything." Excellent.
Yeah, and you're right. There's normally a nurse, because that's one thing is they don't want you wobbling and moving around. So they normally do have a nurse that's in front of you. Mine, both situations, was a guy that put it in, and they both did really great. They talked to me, and I also had a nurse. The first time around, I was in the middle of shock. So my nurse kept saying, like, "I'm here, look at me, focus on me." She was kind of like trying to get my attention, like, "We're gonna do this." She was like kind of trying to talk me kind of through it. The second time she was real pleasant, like, "How you doing? Da, da, da. Are you so excited about your baby?" Like, so it was a different experience, because it was like the one was dealing with me in shock, and she was like holding me, literally holding my whole body. And then the other one, the next time, was basically kind of like holding my hand, like being really pleasant and, right there in my face, and like, "Are you excited? And what's your baby's name?" And, and all this different stuff. And, and it was more of a fun experience. And even him behind me with all the stuff that he's doing, he's chatting with me and chatting with the nurse. And it was just a very comfortable experience, because they are aware. And I think actually they asked me about that when they were putting in my IV, if I was nervous about needles. I'm not. But they did ask, and I was like, no. And they were like, "Well, you've had, an epidural, like you've had stuff before." And I was like, "Yeah, I have." I was like, that was different, but I have. And so when I went in there, you are aware of it. But the best way that I can explain it, from actually being aware, because the first time I can't tell you what it was like, I don't know. But the second time is the best way that I can explain it, is it almost feels like somebody pinching your back. Like, I know that sounds really weird, but it kind of feels like a little, like somebody pinched you, and then you don't really feel anything. If it's working properly, you don't feel anything. But, so that's what it felt like to me. But it is one of those things that, yes, you definitely should tell them if you have anxiety, fear of needles, different things, because they have different things. And I think they can offer you other stuff before you even go in there too. There's other stuff they can do, because and I know some people are afraid of certain things, and they do take the option of just putting them under and then coming back. Some people do that over different anxiety reasons, which it's all whatever works for you. I wanted to be awake. I did not want to be put asleep in any way, because the last time I was awake and it was horrifying. So this time with my baby and I was like, no, I need to be awake. I need to make sure everything is good. So, because I was offered that too. They offered me the different choices of, do you want just like an epidural, or do you want, and I was like, oh no, don't put me to sleep. And my doctor's like, I didn't think you wanted to, but I just wanted to offer you, just because I know you have a lot of anxiety from what you've already been through. But it was really cool. And the recovery is different after too. I don't know, because like when you go in for an emergency C-section, there might be room available for you depending on whatever. But normally when you come out of the OR, there's not normally a room ready for you for recovery, because they were not planning for you. So I got pushed off into the hallway after my first son, and I was left in the hallway for I don't know how long, because they had to get me a room ready. And in my situation, they don't put you in a recovery room and then put you in a room. They put you straight up in a room. So things are a little bit different depending on what happens. But when we had our second and it was planned, they put me into the recovery room with the nurses there, and we started breastfeeding right in the recovery room. That was an option. and they were really cool because both of them, like the nurses that we had, they were really, really nice ladies, were like helping us, assisting us, talking to us about different things like eating and diapers with your baby and like all this stuff. And so it was a nice, pleasant thing, taking pictures, all that stuff. And then once you go from recovery, you go into your own room. But that was another thing, is that skin to skin, which people really like, the skin to skin, is the recovery part of it. Is you can take your baby. We got an extra nurse. Like I said, we had an extra nurse. So we got to wheel in basically with baby. The three of us were all together. We stayed together the whole time and got wheeled right into recovery. And that was a big relief to me and made me feel really comfortable. So I know that is part of the gentle C-section, is kind of keeping you all together. Babies doesn't get whisked off to the nursery or, anything like that. As long as nothing's bad. Like if something's going on with baby, yes, take them, do whatever you got to do. But if everything's good, everything's flowing, then you guys can all kind of go together. And that was kind of a nice experience in my opinion. I enjoyed it because we all got to be, he was in the recovery room helping us, and part of the, like being with our baby kind of thing, our bonding time together was the three of us. So it was really nice. So by the time we got to our room, they got us set up in the room, and then family got to come in there. So we got our time together, and then family who was all waiting because it's a planned C-section. So they're all at that. Nowadays, I don't know what's going on with COVID, because we might only be able to allow, one person with you. Yeah. But at that time, everybody was there waiting for the baby. So they'll just be waiting for your phone call and lots of pictures on your phone right now.